Hey everybody, welcome to Road to Lead. I'm M. Michelle DeRosier, your host. I'm thrilled and excited to have Nick Monzi here from Learn Fresh. And you know that I don't do bios. You will have all of that information in the show notes. We really want to talk to our guests and have them give us the real story, not just the perfect one that they've written out. Hi, Nick. Welcome. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your leadership journey.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. Excited to chat with you today. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Learn Fresh. We're a nonprofit that's headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but operates all across the country and increasingly around the world. And we're focused on the intersection between students' STEM and social emotional development and sports and entertainment. Our flagship program is called NBA Math Hoops, engages students in foundational math through the game of basketball, NBA and WNBA player statistics. And we've worked to build an infrastructure around the program that doesn't just include what happens in the classroom with the game and curriculum, but also a community experience that connects students around the country and around the world. So that's the spirit of our work. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, and how that's evolved over time. But I've come to this with a personal passion for sport, personal passion for education. We may talk about this more, but my start in education was actually through music education. So I've always loved the relevance of students learning through something that they care about and that's meaningful in their day-to-day life.
This is a good segue to your background with music and then how that translated to Learn Fresh using STEM and sports.
But when I reflect on my own schooling as a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
When there are always these questions like, what's your favorite subject in school? And for me, it was always music, right? Because in those classes, I was able to explore subject matter that had relevance for my life outside of the walls of the school building, right? And every kid has their own music, like every person has their own music, and it looks different, sounds different, but it's something that we can all connect to. And that when I went to pursue my undergrad, I went to school for entrepreneurship and marketing and decided to get a business degree. But while I was in school, I realized I didn't want to work for a bank. I didn't want to work for a financial institution. This just wasn't my identity, my personality. And I realized that music still was a real passion of mine. So I performed and also taught in Drum Corps International, which is this kind of college age summer performing arts experience with students across the country. After I graduated from school, I continued to teach, and actually still to this day continue to teach and work in that space. After I finished school, I went to work for an organization called Hartford Performs in Hartford, Connecticut, which is focused on reintegrating the arts into the public school system there. And while I was with the organization, I thought, I really need to work on rebuilding, and not necessarily rebuilding, but formulating my own vision for the space for what I think I can deliver to education as an individual person. So I went to get my master's in education at the Harvard Ed School. While I was there, met the folks who were constructing the organization and joined the team in 2013.
Talk with us a little bit about your co-founder journey, the difference with being the co-founder, but also being the CEO, and what those two hats look like day to day.
It's been a really cool journey. So when I started, I was essentially in like the director of program / COO role. So more on the operations side, and Khalil Fuller, my co-founder, was in the CEO seat. So, his skill set, and this is something that I've learned, I think I learned a lot from him over time. His skill set was really in the area of creating belief around the work, right? And bringing a social impact lens to the work from his own personal experience. And that's something that's a passion that we've shared, but he really communicated it to the world and built it as an identity of the organization. Conversely, I had worked and have worked around education directly with students, in public school settings and informal learning settings. And that experience allowed me from the beginning to build a solid programmatic infrastructure for the work. Basically, when we stepped into the organization, we were tasked with taking this board game, the NBA Math Hoops board game and curriculum, and turning it into experience that could scale in communities. And that first year in 2013, I probably spent half my life in Cleveland, Ohio, as we were launching the program, really learning about what could succeed. But most of that infrastructure is still around a decade later. So I'm really, really proud of that. in 2018, Khalil moved on to get his master's degree at Stanford, and I stepped into the CEO role then. And I've always been a really creative person and kind of a bigger picture thinker, but I had to work on more of the details and like more of the operation side of things, which was a really incredible learning experience for the first 5 years or so. And now for the last 4 years, I've been able to kind of amplify my own vision and my own lens a bit, and it's been refreshing, just because I feel like the work that I'm doing now, kind of setting and guiding the vision of the organization and the strategy, is more my natural state, if you will.
Seems like you were like, well, the first 5 years, it's really around the organizational structure and building that and ensuring that you have a good foundation in place. And then really having the freedom to look at the vision and move into the space where you were more comfortable. When you think about this as a nonprofit leader, knowing that we wear many hats and many times those hats are worn at once, how you have to do both, right? Even if you have to spend most of your time on one aspect of it. How did you balance? I need Nick to wear this hat today, or I need Nick to wear this hat this hour. Just kind of the balancing needs for the different skills that it takes to be a nonprofit leader.
I think a lot of it is one, openness to learning. So when you started describing that, the first thing I'm thinking about is, well, I've had to like work on legal contracts and like do all this stuff that is completely out of my realm of expertise naturally. But as like you have to adapt, and you have to be willing to learn. So that goes for folks outside of the education sector, but being in the education sector, it's part of who I am. The other thing I would say is having being surrounded by other really strong leaders and allowing them to lead is a big part of the journey, and has been a big part of the journey. I'm so blessed to have folks on the team who are running the programmatic work, who are running the product development work, who are running our event series, a lot of our curriculum development, and they are strong leaders in their own right. They have strong vision. They're able to understand the nuances of the things that they're responsible for guiding, and they are able to do that relatively independently. So I'm at this. I've been able to evolve to the point where I'm able to dip in and out of parts of the work, but I don't necessarily need to be in something all the time. You know what I mean? And it's a real blessing as a leader. So I've learned so much about being able to trust other people and being able to allow other people to really guide and shape the work. And kind of as a founder, like releasing myself from having to feel like I need to do everything all the time.
This is going to be a thread that I think most people will pick up on. The idea that you need to move out of the way and allow other people to lead, and trust the team that you have around you, and the fact that they're part of your team for a reason, and those skills for them to develop it both for themselves and for your organization. Sometimes you can't be holding on to everything. This has been echoed a lot. I'm going to put a pin on it as being important, because it seems like a common thread for a good leader, really knowing how to make the space for your team to be able to lean into the work that they do and learn how to do it well.
Yeah, and Michelle, I'll double down on that real quick. I think it really is important. It's an important skill for a leader to be able to recognize those moments when you are holding up the work, or you are no longer the best person on the team to do the work. Because it actually
pause and
yeah.
Just go ahead and pause. We're gonna take a moment because talk about needing to have a moment with yourself. No, it's really important that sometimes you're the one holding everybody back.
Yeah, a lot of times, and it helps speed up the work when you think about your goal for any organization. Like for us, we want to reach kids all over the world, and we want to reach kids through different subjects, and there's 0% chance that one person can do all that, and sometimes you actually slow things down when you just don't know when to turn things over to other people.
Okay. So we know that wasn't necessarily a thing that you came to all at once. Okay, if Nick doesn't do everything, how did you come to that place? And are you still coming to that moment?
Yeah, no, I think I am always still coming to that moment because you have these series of realizations around like, oh, I've been doing this for how many years? Like,
Mhm.
okay, it's time to not do that anymore. But I think part of it in the beginning was just being. At some point, you get to the point where you're doing too much stuff, and you're like, okay, I just need to not do things anymore. And
Yeah.
and then you hand something over, and it's like, oh, that now I feel a sense of relief because my teammate's able to do it really well, better than me,
Yeah.
and I don't have to do it anymore. And then you get into the habit of like, oh, I'm feeling this again. I know what to do now. I'm feeling this again. I know what to do now.
It's very practical, right? I spoke with the executive director for my Could Kate Trust. She talks about needing to do the work internally to understand who you are. Because if you don't do that work, then it's going to limit your team. And I also spoke with Sarah Cantor, the ED of Greater Good Studio. She said, was given the advice to sit down with everything that she does, write it all down, and then start circling the things that she does not need to do that somebody else on her team can do. I think it's the marriage of the two. If you don't let yourself identify who you are and what you're good at, you're good at a lot of things, but are all of the things that you're good at things that you want to do? And then if you don't do the next practical step and figuring out, okay, I can delegate this, somebody else could be much better at this than I am, you have to do both parts, right? Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to move out of the way.
Absolutely, I agree.
As Nick was saying, this is something that he's continually coming to. So don't feel bad that if you're like, but I don't want to give this up. Sometimes it happens.
That is the truth.
When you think about the work that you're doing now, I know strategy and the vision is something that I feel really passionate about. What are you looking at for the strategy and the vision for Learn Fresh?
So we try and think about taking an idea and then amplifying it in as many different ways as possible. So what is the one core simple thing that we're trying to do, and then how can we be creative with that starting point? So I'll use NBA Matthews as a case study. Obviously, that's our most evolved program. It started as a physical board game with a wraparound curriculum that engages students in the classroom through a basketball season, more or less. And you start by signing a contract, you draft your team, you play a series of games using the board game through a trade deadline and then a championship tournament. That program is distributed to the schools, out of school time programs across the country at no cost. And we've had a tremendous amount of success building collaborative community in all of our team markets across the US and now across the 50-state strategy. But that core idea we've seen as really a starting point for what the bigger vision of the program can be. From an implementation standpoint, we think about this from a three-pronged approach. First is the core program, which I've described. The second is a digital strategy with 2 mobile apps that we have that allow students to basically compete in more of a fantasy sports like experience. There's a NBA Matthews board game app, just NBA Matthews in the App Store, that is going to evolve into essentially an education-based fantasy sports league for kids. And then on the flip side of that, we've actually done a series of events with athletes where we put the game board on an actual basketball court and have the athletes pair up with students, take shots, complete math problems, and it's the simulated version of the board game in real life. We've built a version of that can live in summer programs and in out of school time programs that have basketball courts. So we have this strategy to take the physical product and turn it into basically like a physical activity experience for students. So that's the diversification strategy on the program side. And then thinking about the breadth of the program, basketball is such a global sport. So there are students all over the world who are excited about it. I actually checked this weekend. We've had students from 125 different countries download our mobile app in the first 3 months.
Wow.
Which is crazy,
fantastic. Right? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And in a lot of countries, it's just one kid here, one kid there, one family here, one family there. Yeah, but it just shows the power of the game. So for us, it's not just about here and how can we implement here in the US, but how can we bring the program to other parts of the world where the game is relevant? So we've started to do that, and we have a partnership in Australia that will have about 10,000 students in it in the program over the next year. We're working with NBA Africa on the implementation in Nigeria and South Africa. Some conversations in Japan with a professional league there. So that's how we think about programmatic scale and growth: is diversifying the idea from an implementation standpoint, and then scaling the idea from a demographic and geographic standpoint.
And that development from the initial board game to the app, how long did that take?
Surprisingly quick to V1. So that was a little bit of a pandemic strategy for us. We realized that we weren't going to have a lot of in-person activity happening in 2020, 21. Yeah. So during the summer of 2020, we were lucky enough to get funding to support the development of that. We put together the first version that was rolled out in classrooms in about 4 months or so, with Clever, our boutique development firm that we work with. And then we've just been refining the product over the last year and a half, adding new features.
And then the core of the board game, how long were you perfecting that before you were like, okay, we can leverage this to do the digital strategy, to do the other stuff? I want to bring out the fact that you guys had spent a lot of time investing in making what you know work well, and then leveraging that when you were in the pandemic, where you're like, oh, I can pivot and do this differently because I already know how this model works in this way. And I've been thinking about it, that it could work in other ways as well. Talk a little bit about what those conversations were like internally with your team. How did you get to the place where you're like, we do this really well. Let's think about different ways that we can expanding on what we do.
For sure. So to your point around the history behind the product and all that initial growth, it's important to note that the Math Hoops board game was first developed by a math educator named Tim Scheit in San Diego, California, starting in the late 90s. So that product has been around for a tremendous amount of time, and has, at this point, 25 years basically of prototype pilot, and then launch and growth experience. So that made us really confident in the moment when we had to pivot, that we were like, we know this thing works. We know what we're working with. How can we be intentional about replicating the experience in a way that it holds in place all the things that are really good about what was created by Tim. So that was the intention. And then in terms of the team, like, we're just so lucky. I can't stress this enough. The team that we have is incredible. From the first day that the world shut down here in the US, like, we were like, what can we do to make sure that we're still engaging the students that we're engaging? And it started with distributing games to families directly, which ended up, being a 50 state strategy. We had students in all 50 states receive games. Then we got into the digital refresh and the development of the app. And then we launched a virtual training and implementation strategy for the school year. So, I mean, there was not an ounce of pushback on the team. Everyone was just like, we're going to do this. We're going to figure it
out. Maybe a little more than luck, because I do think there is tone that is set at the leadership level in terms of what kind of creativity or innovation, and that move for, hey, we didn't try this before, but we're taking all of the learnings that we've had in the past. Here's this hypothesis that it could work. Let's test it. There has to be intentionality behind creating that kind of culture. And I'm curious about how you think about that to make it a space where everybody feels like we can put this idea, we can test it. If it doesn't work, we'll take the learnings and try something else. How do you create that innovative, creative space for your team to work in?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to reflect on. I guess looking at it from an external perspective, I think one of the most important things that you can do as a leader is to have humility, and to just say, like, start with yourself and be like, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to change the things that I do if there's a better way to do them. And that's taking time. Like, I think, I started my work in this organization when I was 23 years old, right? So when you're 23, you don't even have a fully developed adult brain yet. And so I've learned that over time. And I've been lucky. I should call this out, but I've been lucky to have experience in my kind of performing arts space with an organization called the Madison Scouts in Wisconsin, where I've been able to test out a lot of these leadership skills in a different
Okay.
context and learn and grow myself. But that humility is really important. And I think I always, if there's anything that I try and do as a leader of the organization, is to set the tone that you know what you don't know what you don't know, and
Mhm.
you have to be willing to grow along the way. And I think that our entire team is filled with people. We've just been intentional about bringing people on board who believe that and
Mhm.
believe that for themselves. Not They don't have to be coached into it. That's just who they are.
Yeah.
So we I think the reason why we're able to adapt quickly is because we have a clear understanding of the things that we're good at. We hold true to those things, and then everything else in the picture is kind of up for debate at all times, and we're
Yeah.
always willing to tinker.
And you talk about in the recruiting standpoint, bringing in people who already have that. What does it look like when you're interviewing and really looking for those people? Are there questions that you ask that maybe let it shine a little bit more? How do you identify those folks?
Yeah. Um, we try and spend a lot of time with the people that we think we want to hire. There are two parts to this. So the
Mm-hmm.
programmatic side, every person on our program team was in our MathHoops community or in our Learn Fresh community before they joined the team. So we knew them when they were a teacher. We knew their
Yeah.
students. We worked with them programmatically. So we were able to develop a longer term relationship with them. They were able to understand the culture of the organization years before actually joining. That's been really helpful because that team is the biggest team and they guide a lot of the strategy.
Yeah.
And then for other departments or other groups in the organization, like development or marketing, um, we just spend a lot of time with the people throughout the process. And I think the again, we're all pretty rooted people and who
Yeah.
we are. So we can kind of feel it. You can just kind of pick
Yeah.
up on the spirit of another person.
That's helpful to know as folks are transitioning to that more formalized leadership role. The team and the people that are around you are really going to help to either make or break the organization. So it is something that is important when you're thinking about who should be here and in what capacity and how do they align or don't align with the mission and the vision that you have for the organization.
Definitely. And one thing I'll share, if this is helpful for other leaders, one thing
Mm-hmm.
that we try and do is we hire the person, not the person's skill set, right? The skills are somewhat important, right? You need to know what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing generally, but we hire the person first. And
Mm-hmm.
then the first 6 months or so of that person's experience in the organization is half prescribed and half discovery, meaning we'll share uh, we'll share some guidance around where we would like the role to go,
Mm-hmm.
what we're hoping to achieve.
Yeah.
But we give that person a chance to discover how their skill sets can fit within the organization. And with almost every person on the team, there are
Mm-hmm.
things that get surfaced that are unexpected that
Mm-hmm.
we didn't see. And I really believe in this process because if you just put someone into a role and kind of force them to do a specific job, maybe
Yeah.
that's what you need in the short term, but you lose out on all the potential of what the person can bring to your organization.
You definitely went right to where I wanted to go. Nick and I spoke a little bit before this. I was like, this is a perfect tool to have in your toolkit as a leader is to understand that the job description doesn't necessarily have to be set in stone, right? Of course, there are things that you need that person to do, but as Nick very clearly said, that you're going to gain in the short term, but potentially lose out on all of the skill and the creativity that this person could bring that your job description is just not allowing them to test and to put into practice. If you're going to take anything very practical, look at your job description and 50% of what you need, but 50% of that exploration for that person to kind of fit into that role within the organization.
Yeah. And I think, Michelle, some of our habit as a
Mm-hmm.
society comes from just this need of always having to grow as fast as possible and having to evolve as fast as possible. And sometimes if you just
Mm-hmm.
slow down a little bit and just say, okay, like, you know, whether it's achieved in 2 months or 6 months, 7 months, whatever. Um, Sometimes the net growth over the long term is much more significant than what
Yeah.
you're looking at when you're kind of in your tunnel trying to hire for a specific teammate.
Absolutely. Like, I need this program person right now. I don't have the energy to be worried about, what's going to happen 6 months down the line. But yeah, you need to balance both.
Absolutely. And I understand there are situations where you just need someone to get something done, and like you don't have a lot of time. But
Mhm.
I think there's ways to balance it, right? Like just holding a little space for that person to be creative and show who they are can go a long way.
Absolutely. Obviously, coming from an education background, learnings are just one of those things that you naturally do. What have you learned that maybe you would have done differently for leadership role here or in past formalized leadership roles?
Um, I, I when you kind of prompted me with this, I was trying to think about it, because I tend to be the type of person who's like, the choices that I've made are the choices that I've made, and I'm not gonna like regret anything. So I would say that formally, there's not much that I would go back and change, because I think you need to experience whatever you experience to help yourself grow.
Mhm.
I would say that the point that we were talking about before around delegation and being willing to step back from things, I
Mhm.
probably would have done that sooner in the
Mhm.
journey than I did. I think there are reasons why I chose to be more intensive around the work at an earlier
Mhm.
stage in our growth, but that also cost me um, a lot of like mental health, I would say, and like physical health over the
Yeah.
years. And pre-pandemic, I was like on a plane every single week going somewhere to do something, and that just
Goodness.
was not healthy for me. So
Oh, sometimes your body will tell you before anything else that you can go where you want to do, but I'm not coming with you.
yeah,
So good luck.
exactly.
In terms of what that expectation was for your first year in the CEO role versus what it actually turned out to be, were there any significant differences, or was it pretty much what you expected?
Pretty much what I expected. I'll say that first, Khalil did a really good job as he was transitioning out of the CEO role of intentionally handing things over to me over time. So it was a very smooth transition for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, there was basically the remaining components of the role that I hadn't yet accessed were maybe like a couple specific donors that I had to build relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time that I was stepping into the role, it was really just about stabilizing, growing the organization. And
Mm-hmm.
I was also lucky that two of our key program leaders had just joined the team the year before, so
Yeah.
they were ready to kind of step in and grow and lead the work, while I was taking the step into vision building and fundraising and all that.
Thoughtful transitioning is what I'm definitely hearing
Yeah,
here and how important that is.
definitely,
How
and
are you
especially if you
continuing that? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Michelle, I think especially if you care about the organization, right? Like if you've been leading something and you want it to continue to succeed after your time,
Mm-hmm.
you should try and do everything that you can to set the thing up to work without you. And I,
Mm-hmm.
I think Khalil did a really good job of that. I've done a really good job of that. I think with the folks on my team now.
Mm-hmm.
And when the time comes for me to do something else with my life, I aspire to do the same at that stage. And um, the thoughtful transitioning, it really does matter, and it should be happening all the time. It's not just when someone's leaving. There are, as we were talking about before with delegation, there's always an opportunity to continue evolving the people around you and yourself.
Love what you said about the fact that it's a continual process. Because I think we tend to think in the nonprofit space in just the immediate, because there are so many immediate needs that we have to meet, and there's only so much time and there's only so much funding. The idea that I have to be thinking about transitioning. But you could be doing that in the immediate. Like you said, Lil was doing that with you, bringing you along for certain meetings or letting you know about certain aspects of his day to day that you were already learning while he was there and not getting to the point where he's long gone and then you have to figure everything out. I love that continual process.
Yeah, and today I'll double down on the fact that I feel like we're transitioning all the time. That doesn't mean that I'm up if whether I'm with the organization for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. It's more about how um, the best thing that I could ever experience personally is someday the organization can live completely without me and grow and thrive. And that's, as a co-founder, that is the ultimate compliment to the work that I've put in personally. So I'm always thinking about that slow transition of how can I empower other people around me to be taking on leadership, to evolve through the work. And it's all about pacing, I think, is like what is the right dosage of dispensing those things to people so that the organization can continually be rising.
I love the dosage and the pacing two together. How do you help team members see maybe potential that you see in them in terms of opportunities that you're like, oh, you should really take this on? How do you help bring your team to seeing kind of the potential that you see? And then how do you help them take on some of those additional responsibilities? How do you make room for that?
Yeah, I would say slowly and gently. So it's not like, okay, we've had a lot of transition in the team over the last year. So Jeff, who's our COO, does a lot of the operational logistics still, but he used to oversee like the event series on the program side of things, right? And like some of these like program operations. And now he's really running a lot of our product development work, which is a completely new arm of the organization. Sumner, who has been our grant writer and actually just submitted his last grant ever yesterday, has transitioned into being the director of communications. So he's taking on that marketing role, and we have a new grant writer. So, but those transitions have been slow, and it's not like we have a meeting and say, hey, now you're going to be this person and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. It's I look at it as more like, okay, let's seed this idea. Like, hey, can you start working on this? Like, I know this is something you're interested in. I know you're passionate about this. Let's see how it goes. And then it evolves into, hey, let's do this. And then it builds itself to a conversation of, hey, what do you think about owning this bucket of work? So I try and plan ahead, and I try and plant seeds very intentionally with each person so that they can feel confident in themselves before they step into really leading or guiding something.
Really like that. If there's somebody who is really comfortable where they are and not necessarily looking to transition elsewhere, how do you handle that? And how do you balance, okay, maybe it would be helpful to have somebody transition into a different role or add more different components to their work, but if they're really good at what they do and they're really comfortable where they are, how do you balance just respecting their idea for their career and then just looking at the organization and seeing potentially other needs?
Well, I think if that person's still providing value to you and the organization through the work that they're doing, personally, I don't see a problem if they want to keep doing that. Like if they're good at it, they like it, and that's their area of expertise. At some point, you just need to respect someone's willingness to be who they want to be. We have a team of people who, by and large, are very growth oriented, and that might be the same in a lot of different education organizations like ours, education startups, just because of the nature of the work. But so we don't encounter that too much. But I would, if it were ever to happen, I mean, I personally would be all for the person doing what they feel confident in. I think there's some people are motivated by growth and by change and by evolution, and some people are motivated by doing one thing really well all the time. And there's room for both.
It's okay if somebody's like, I'd rather go deeper than move up. For everybody, not feeling like you have to push your team to always be growing and transitioning, that they can be growing deeper, not
Mhm.
necessarily wider.
Definitely. And that resonates a lot because even though a lot of what I've been talking about is growth and evolution and
Mm-hmm.
all that, I've been doing this for almost a decade, right? So I have
Yeah,
personally made the choice not to go somewhere else, right? I've
yeah.
committed myself to going deeper with this organization. And a number of our team members are like that. Colleen,
Mm-hmm.
who runs our programs, our chief program officer, she spent 15 years with the same organization before she joined us. So like a lot of us are really committed people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we like the the growth within the space that we're in. So that resonates for sure. It resonates.
Nick is a traveler, and I imagine that once he transitions out of Learn Fresh, it won't be out of Learn Fresh. It's gonna be Learn Fresh Global. um, Talk to us a little bit about just your passion for traveling, if at all, how it impacts your work, kind of how do you use it when you were talking about mental health. Just how is that for you? Just kind of that space to just let go.
I love that you framed it that way because it really is about that. So it's my passion for travel is really rooted in this understanding of different cultures and different people, different experiences. I like to, for me, it's more impactful to actually be around people than to read a
Mm-hmm.
book or something about a place. So
Yeah.
that has been the fuel to that fire, and I've been lucky to go all over from Antarctica to Argentina to Dubai to Italy to Australia. So that 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 that's something that will continue to be a part of my life. The mental health aspect is a big part of it. I have
Mm-hmm.
had times where I've been so drained by the work, and for me, just
Yeah.
getting on a plane, going somewhere, going with my wife somewhere,
Yeah.
hanging out for a week, experiencing the culture, and eating good food, and going to some concerts or something that
Mm-hmm.
fills me back up. And I even if the trip is busy, I end it and I'm like, I feel fulfilled again. So that is
Yeah.
really a big part of it. That's my release. And then for the work, it's allowed me to feel comfortable as we've started to take these steps internationally. I think it's allowed me to even think that that's a possibility, and
Yeah.
then b we've we've had conversations with folks in different countries who speak different languages and have different cultural norms and backgrounds, and being on calls with them, and hopefully once we're post pandemic in person with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ability to have the experiences that I've kind of loaded myself up with make it a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier to feel comfortable in situations which are different than my own. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I take a lot of pride in because it it allows us to connect. It allows us to take the work that we're doing and connect with more people than we would otherwise.
Thank you for being comfortable talking about the mental health aspect of leadership and how you can be passionate. Clearly, you are about the work, but still experience that feeling of burnout and needing to get away, and that it's perfectly okay having to have an outlet so that you don't get burnt out and leave the space where everybody actually needs you to be. So, thank you for owning that.
Absolutely, it's huge. You have to be able to take care of yourself, and again, that's the thing that I've learned the hard way a little bit, but I've gotten
Mm-hmm.
better and continue to work on every day.
What is your next travel after things calm down or when we get to go places again, I guess?
Yeah. um, my wife is a wedding photographer and fine art photographer, and she actually had a client who booked her to do an elopement in Japan. So in October,
Whoa.
we're going to be going to
Nice.
Japan. I well, amount of time there is TBD right now, but we know we'll be going at least for a little bit.
Yeah, you don't go all the way to Japan and just like, I'm going to work and then come right back.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Ah, I'm so jealous. Take me with you. I promise I'll be really good. You can put me in your suitcase. I'll be
Sounds good.
quiet at baggage checkout. It's fine. What is a dream trip that you haven't taken yet?
I Japan is actually the place that is number one on my bucket list right
Oh,
now, for
okay.
sure. Um, I also I I also really want to go to like Greece, Egypt, kind of some of these like
Mm,
early centers of world history, just to learn a little
yeah.
bit more and experience a little bit more there. And then I've had this like unique fascination with Central Asia, like all
Mhm.
the kind of like countries in the middle of Asia,
Yeah.
Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and all those, just because they look
Yeah.
beautiful. Like they have mountains and kind of like nomadic culture, kind of history of nomadic culture and everything. I'd love to learn more about that.
Okay. Yeah. I have a feeling that you're going to make it to every single one of those places
In time, in
in
time.
pretty soon. I want to just be mindful of the time as you're thinking about your transition, continually preparing for it. When you think about allocating time and funds to help prepare your team, what does that look like in a practical sense? Like, how do you budget it? How do you talk to funders? There a line item for professional development for my team? Like, how do you do that in the practical?
Yeah, we have a stipend,
Mm-hmm.
more or less, that everyone can access each year for professional development. And it's a couple $1,000. We'll see if that changes as the team continues to grow. But the idea is that everyone could, in theory, take some sort of experience to
Mm-hmm.
further themselves each year. Not everyone does every single year, which is fine. You know, people's life
Mm-hmm.
situations are always evolving, but it's always there for folks to lean into and to fall back on and uh, folks have taken advantage of it. You know, whether it's signing up for a webinar that we have to pay for, or going to a conference.
Yeah.
Um, and also the other thing I'll say is this: not all of those things have been directly obvious in terms of their application to our work, right? Sometimes someone is
Very
just
glad you
interested
said that.
in
Yeah.
something different, right? Or like something
Hmm.
tangential that may support their growth as a professional, but isn't necessarily about STEM education or student social and emotional development. But if
Yeah.
that's fulfilling the person and if it's helping them to feel like they're growing professionally and personally, then
Hmm.
it's well worth our investment because it allows them to feel like they're continuing to grow in other ways beyond just the scope of our work. And hopefully that inspires, commitment to the work and commitment to learn fresh.
Absolutely. One of the conversations that when I was trying to figure out what that transition is going to look like for me as I'm going through it now from a very practical standpoint, how do you talk to your funders about needing to create the space where everybody in your organization can actually be figuring out those roles and
Mhm.
making the room where the funding is not just the program delivery, but needing some of that capacity funding. Do you have those conversations with your funders? How receptive or not receptive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever had a conversation with a funder about that directly. It's usually
Mm-hmm.
something that we'll just bake into our budgeting and into
Mm-hmm.
our proposals. Um, and it's just something that we value as an organization. That's like part of the experience of being a team member at
Mm-hmm.
LearnFresh is having access to that type of culture. And for me, that's a non-negotiable. Like I would never
Mm-hmm.
feel the need to justify that to someone because that's just who we are and that's what we do. And if someone doesn't like that, then there's nothing I can do
Mm-hmm.
about that. But that's who we are and that's what we believe in. And hopefully that signals uh, to other to funders and other people in the community that we care about the development of our team, right, and both as people and within the context of the organization. And you kind of called out this piece around um, the application of the professional development being more than just about the work specifically. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really selfish when an organization focuses all their effort on just trying to make someone better at the thing that they're specifically doing for you. Like that is not what this is about, So you have to think about how to build the whole person, almost like we talk about building the whole child, right? You have to build the whole
Yeah.
person.
No, absolutely. And I tell my team that I would love for everyone to grow with us, but we know that's not always going to be possible. So, however, you're going to grow, whether you're going to grow with us, you're still going to be your mission focused and you're going to be doing good work. So, why wouldn't I want you to grow to go do good work? Like,
Right.
we're still changing the world. So, if I can help you do that, then jump in 100%.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
I will open up and let you just give any last words, any other thoughts that we didn't cover that you would like to share.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Oh, I just first off want to thank you for having me on today. It's been a lot of fun to just talk and riff on some of these ideas with another leader. And, to the community, we're always, open for collaboration, partnership, engagement with folks of all different kinds. So feel free to reach out to us. My email is nick@learnfresh.org. You can check out our work at learnfresh.org. I'm excited to share the work with you if you'd like.
Awesome. Nick also has a podcast. It's the Learn Fresh podcast. You want to just tell a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, the Learn Fresh podcast is I co-host with Calvin Seibert, our chief academic officer, and one of my really good friends, and we just talk about the intersection between education and community. So all the angles of that, whether it's how professional sports teams are engaged and athletes are engaged, the research side of things, how students and educators are impacted by the day-to-day of the education space. So definitely encourage you to check that out. Definitely gives it a strong paints a strong picture of the organization and what we value.
Yeah, I've enjoyed quite a few episodes so far. So learnfresh.org. Nick, welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time. I wanted to have guests that people could connect with and learn from and really see what the application of leadership is. So I appreciate you doing that for our audience.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate it. And hopefully, if we talk again in a year or 2 years or whatever it is, I have new answers. That means I'm continuing to grow in my journey.
I imagine that you will. And like I said, moving to Greece to lead Learn Fresh Global, then I'll be interviewing you from there.
Thanks. We'll see.
All right. No problem. Thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.